shut up. Keep your dreams to yourself. He said, no, I have to tell you. He said, last night I dreamed that the sun and the moon and 11 stars started revolving around me, and they all bowed down to me. Well, mayhem broke out. I mean, Jacob had to send people to their room. It was mayhem. And Jacob said to Joseph, dude, you got an ego thing going on here. But Moses recorded in this story that Joseph thought about these things. I mean, Jacob thought about these things. So Israel is not like Ohio. Ohio, there's green pastures everywhere. You can't drive 15 minutes without going past a pasture somewhere. But in Israel, it's not like that. And to have herds and flocks, you got to move your animals good distances to get fresh feeding. And so Jacob's sons were feeding the flocks at a place called Shechem. And Jacob said, I haven't heard from the guys for a while. I want you to go check on them. So Joseph went to Shechem to check on his brothers. Well, when he got there, he had moved them. They had grazed the place down, and the brothers had moved. And Joseph ran into a guy, and he said, have you seen my brother? And he goes, yeah, I talked to him. They went to Dothan. So Dothan is about 10 miles northwest of Shechem. So Joseph headed off for Dothan. His brothers saw him coming before he saw them. And one of the brothers said, here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him, and then we'll see what becomes of his snotty dreams. And somehow or another, that made sense to the brothers. So when Joseph got there, they pounced on him, took his fancy coat, and threw him down into a pit while they planned how they were going to get rid of him. And then we'll see what becomes of his snotty dreams. Reuben, the oldest brother, said, and somehow we can't kill our brother. He's our brother. We can't shed innocent blood. So when Joseph got and Judah said, you know what, you're right. They pounced on him. Besides, we could make some money on this. And threw him down. Dothan here is on a trade route. We'll just wait for a caravan to come along. And when a caravan comes along, we'll negotiate a price and we'll pocket. So they kept him until the caravan of Midianites came by. They sold him to the Midianite traders, and Joseph was taken into slavery in Egypt. You see, sometimes divine providence doesn't look like what you think it should look like. God led Joseph to believe that he was going to do something important and significant, and now he finds himself no longer his dad's favorite. He finds himself a slave going into Egypt. The Midianites sold Joseph to a man who was a high-ranking officer in Pharaoh's court. He was the captain of the guard. And at first, Joseph was just an everyday slave, just like everybody else. But Joseph was a hard worker, and everything he did succeeded. So his owner, Potiphar, said, I'm going to promote this kid. So every job he gave him, he did well, and things got better. And finally, Potiphar said, I don't have any slaves who is as good as this guy, and he promoted him to be the head of the whole household. Now it looks like providence is working. Now it looks like things are happening the way they're supposed to happen. But Potiphar's wife wasn't the most moral person in the world. She had issues. And one day, she said to Joseph, I want you to come to bed with me. And Joseph said, God bless him. A lot of brothers in the room that wouldn't have said this. He said, I can't do that. You see, your husband has trusted me with everything, and I just can't betray him by doing that. But Potiphar's wife, she was pretty impressed with herself, and she felt irresistible. And she tried and tried. Finally, one day, there was nobody in the house, and Joseph had to go in the house to do something, and Potiphar's wife grabbed him and was using all her wiles to persuade him. And finally, Joseph twisted out of his robe and ran out of the house. Now her ego was wounded. Now she felt humiliated. And she intended to get even. And so she yelled and yelled, and people came in, and she said, that Hebrew slave came in, and he was going to take advantage of me. Look, he even took his robe off and left it. The house was full of tension all day until Potiphar came home from work. And when Potiphar came home from work, she couldn't get to him fast enough. Excuse me, with her crocodile tears. And she lied and said Joseph tried to take advantage of her. And when Moses wrote this story, he said, Potiphar was angry. I've always been, had a hard time interpreting this. Was he angry because he thought Joseph really did it? Or was he angry because he knew what kind of wife he had and that she had pushed everything to this? I just want to throw this in there. In 41 years, I've known a lot of people who thought they could cheat on their spouse and get away with it. Doesn't work that way, church. It never works that way. I've had people in my office ready, just sick, not wanting to breathe another breath because they found out that somebody who swore to be faithful to them wasn't. Do not be deceived. All right. He was angry with Joseph. Joseph was a slave, and Potiphar could have killed him on the spot. You do know that, right? Joseph had no rights. If Potiphar really was angry with Joseph, he could have killed him right there. Turned out he was a soldier, and he was competent to do it himself. But instead, he put him in Pharaoh's jail. Now he could have put him on a chain gang somewhere. He could have done dozens of things with Joseph. But for some reason, he put him in Pharaoh's jail. You'd rather go to the federal prison than the state prison, right? All right. Now it looks again like the providence of God is not working. Joseph worked hard. He was honest. He did the right thing. He said no when it was hard to say no. And what did he have to show for it? He was in Potiphar's boss's jail. He had to think to himself, this is not what it's supposed to look like. He had to have moments where he said, I'm on your side. What's going on? It's not supposed to be like this. And then Pharaoh became angry with his cupbearer and his baker. Something happened that made Pharaoh angry, and he put the cupbearer and the baker in jail. And the guy who ran the jail said, we got to take good care of these guys. If Pharaoh changes his mind and wants them back, we can't have them mugged in here and stuff. So Joseph was in charge of the cupbearer and the baker. And he took care of them. He made sure they were safe. He did a good job. One morning, the cupbearer and the baker show up, and they're both kind of depressed. And Joseph says, what's wrong, guys? And the cupbearer said, well, I had a dream last night, and I can't shake it off. And Joseph said, yeah, I'm pretty good with dreams. God will tell you the interpretation. Tell me your dream. And the cupbearer said, well, I dreamed that I had Pharaoh's cup, and I squeezed 3 clusters of grapes into the cup, and then I placed it in Pharaoh's hand. Joseph said, the 3 clusters means 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh's going to figure out that you didn't do anything wrong, and he's going to restore you to your office. Well, he's happy. He's jumping up, high-fiving people. I'm going to get out of here in 3 days. I get my old job back. So the baker's feeling pretty good about that. And the baker says, hey, I had a dream too. And in my dream, I had 3 baskets of bread. And I was taking them to the Pharaoh, and I was carrying them on my head. And all of a sudden, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds happened, and all these birds came flocking down on me and started eating the bread out of the basket on my head. And Joseph said, this isn't good. The 3 baskets mean 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh's going to hang you on the wall, and the birds will eat your flesh. At the end of 3 days, the cupbearer was restored to his job, and the baker was executed, just the way Joseph said. But before the cupbearer left, Joseph said, you owe me one. I want you to tell Pharaoh my story. I'm here because I was kidnapped. I was stolen from my dad. I was sold into slavery. I worked as hard as I could work for Potiphar, and I'm here because his wife told a lie about me. When you get back to Pharaoh's court, would you please tell him my story? Cupbearer said, no problem. I've got you covered. Except when he got back to work, he forgot about Joseph. And so Joseph continued to sit in Pharaoh's jail. Day passed after day, month passed after month, year passed after year. Between the time that he dreamed his dreams and between the end of the story and when the story turns for his good, it was 30 years. I mean, it was 17 years. 17 years. it didn't look like it was supposed to look. God was not doing what Joseph thought God should do. Divine providence doesn't look the way we expect it to look. I'd like to tell you the story, our church story of divine providence. 41 years ago, God gave our church a new idea about the kind of church we could be. It feels normal to you now, but it was radical then. I was a 28-year-old radical. And don't you know that he began to bless us abundantly? And we began to grow. Our whole church was probably about the size of this section over here. That was the whole church. And we grew and we filled the church up, and then we started having a second service, and we did our second service. There's a picture of us full. Things were going the way the vision of God looked like they should go. But we had outgrown our space, and we needed more space. And right next door to us, there was 10 acres and an elementary school building that Parma had sold to somebody else because the population was going down in Parma in the 80s. And I met the guy who owned the building and said, we are interested in buying this. Good, because I want to sell it. And everything looked like it was in our favor. We were parking cars over there on Sunday because we didn't have enough parking. Everything looked like it was going in our favor. And then the guy sold it to another church. Not only did I not get the building, we lost the parking. You'll find this interesting. The church that bought it came from Old Brooklyn, and they sold their building to the guy who they bought a building from, and he turned it into a preschool. That preschool went out of business. We bought the building, and now our Old Brooklyn church is in that building. Divine providence doesn't look like what you think it should. So we didn't get the school. So we hired an architect, and he drew us a building, beautiful building. We raised 40% of the money we needed to build it, and we wanted to borrow the rest, and the savings and loan crisis hit. Anybody remember the savings and loan crisis? All these savings and loans across America, some of them weren't doing good at bookkeeping, a lot of them went out of business, and the government was auditing everybody, and we couldn't have borrowed 2 dimes from a bank when that all was happening. So now God, this is not what it's supposed to look like. We were renting anything we could rent. We rented the Lutheran church across the street for a while, but somebody roller skated in the Lutheran church, and I won't tell you who, but she's the one laughing the loudest right now. Yeah, somebody roller skated in the Lutheran church, and we got thrown out. Lutherans don't like roller skates. I don't know. That's all I know to say. The building was packed. We didn't have enough parking. God was blessing us. We couldn't get more space. We felt like we've done everything we can do. What do? Divine providence doesn't look like what you think it should look like. God had a better idea. And a friend of mine told me that a church on Lund Road in Strongsville went out of business. And I made about 100 telephone calls and found out who owned it. And This is what it looked like when we bought it. That's not what, we did a whole bunch of work on it. Anyway, I found out who owned it. A company in Atlanta had the mortgage on it, and the guy said, "I want to sell the building, and I'm selling it as is. You can, if you haven't inspected, I don't care what's wrong with it. We're done. We've had this building, and we haven't received a dime on it in 10 years, and we're not doing anything." I said, "We'll buy it as is. We're fine." I said, "Can we have 1 year to pay it off?" He said, "Nope, I'm done with this building." And I said, "God." So I said to the guy, "Okay, we'll pay interest on the loan for 1 year until we pay it off." And he goes, "Oh, I can do that. There'll be cash flow." It took us 8 months. We sold our building in Parma, took that cash, paid that building off, remodeled it. And now we felt like, yes, this is the way it's supposed to be. God is with us. Things are going to happen. Sadly, when we moved from Parma to Strongsville, we made some big changes. We changed the church's name. We changed our policy on women in ministry. Believe it or not, in the 80s, it was uncommon for churches like us to let women do what they were gifted to do. And we had an extensive study of the scriptures, and we believe that the distinguishing characteristic is if God gives you the gift to do it, you should be able to do it. There should not be people who think they're smarter than the Holy Spirit. All right. So we moved all that distance. We changed our church's name, and we let women into ministry. And believe it or not, our reward for that was we lost about 60% of the church. We had this big, beautiful auditorium. I thought, man, this is great. Everything's going good. And then, man, we were like a BB in a beer mug in there. And I'm saying to God, this is not what it's supposed to look like. This isn't supposed to be this way. And at the same time, some people, they had an ugly agenda, and they thought they could fire me. I fired them. And then God blessed us again, and the church started growing. The church bought into the mission, and we started doing the kind of stuff that God blesses. And we started growing again, and we grew and grew and grew and grew, and we needed more space again. So we hired an architect. He drew us a bunch of things, how we could add onto the building, and they all looked terrible. And so we said, we can't add onto this building, and we started looking for land. We said, we're going to start all over. We're going to build a campus that allows us to do ministry the way we want to do it. But it turns out finding land wasn't that easy. We filled the place up. The high school's right next to it. We were parking in their parking lot on Sunday. And then the opportunity came for us to do services at the high school. And so we did services in the high school auditorium. Some of you remember this. And we did children's in classrooms. So we bought this old box truck that was worn out, and that's why the company sold it. And we put all our children's stuff in there, and then we drive it over there on Sunday, set everything up, do 2 services, take everything down, put it back in the box truck, and take it back over to the church parking lot. Well, this box truck was junk. Sometimes it wouldn't start. My friend Don Dooley had a strap that he bolted onto this thing. We'd tow that stupid truck over there, unload it, do church, load it all back up, tow it back to our place, and it would be winter, and I'd be saying to God, I'm on your side. And then, in just a miraculous way, I came to Marks Road and at 82, and I looked across the street, and there was a big green and white sign that said this property was for sale. Now, I'm not really very Pentecostal, but once in a while I can have a Pentecostal fit. And that day I did. I parked my truck there on Marks Road. I ran across the street. I came over. The driveway used to be at the end of Marks instead of over here where it is now. And I came up this little stone driveway. I went over. I laid hands on the sign. I made an appointment, and the very next day was Sunday. I brought leaders of the church, and we came and looked at the land. And everybody felt God was in it. We just knew it was awesome. We were all pumped up. We get up here to the end of the driveway, and the real estate guy said, well, you know you're never going to get this, don't you? I've never wanted to punch anybody in the face as much as I mean that in a Christian kind of way. But because I'm the patient man I am, I said, you don't know what we're going to get or not get. We own this land, and he's out of business. The family sold it to us, and I just felt like, oh, God is in this. Is all working out the way it should. And then I went to the bank because we had to, I think we paid about $380,000 for this, and we needed a loan. And I found out that for land loans, you need 20% down. And that would have been over $70,000. We had $22,000 in the bank. But providence works in odd ways. I knew the president of the bank. I had met him at the Chamber of Commerce on many occasions. I sat down in his office and I said, you guys need 20% down. We don't have 10. We don't even have 10%. But I promise you, we'll pay this off early. And by the providence of God, they loaned us the money when we didn't even have 10% down. And church, you paid that off in 4 years. That was a 10-year loan, and you paid that off in 4 years. Things are going really, really well. And all of a sudden, I find out that they want to zone Prospect and 82 as adult entertainment. Brook Park was buying those places out because they wanted to get rid of them. And so they were paying more than what the property was worth. So they were rich and those places want high traffic areas. And Prospect in 82 is a high traffic area. So it fell upon us as a church to lead the charge against this. It was all ugly, it was all unpleasant, but by the providence of God, we won. Or you would be driving by ugliness every week. Things were going well. We were growing in the high school. We were doing the kind of ministry that God blesses, and we hired an architect to draw us a design to build a new campus here. We actually went and looked at churches this person had drawn. And they drew us this beautiful church, but it was a $5 million project, and their building was a $10 million building. And for you who can do math, just doesn't work out right. So once again, we said to God, you got to guide us. We hired another architect, and all he could draw was elementary school buildings. Everything he drew was an elementary school. And I said, we don't want an elementary school, we want a church. So God led us to a beautiful woman named Barb Shregalis. She was an architect who knew how hard it was to work with architects, so she's created a business for people like us so she could help us work with the architect. So she met with our architect a couple of times, and she said, it's not you. You're right, he's not listening. We fired him. By the way, we had to pay both of these architects. And I'm saying to God, this is expensive. It's hard to raise money. And Barb, by the grace of God, found Krebs and Simmons. And David Krebs drew this building, and we made two changes. The auditorium was supposed to seat 750. We downsized it to 500. And there was supposed to be a room right over here, and we cut that out. We had to do that to bring it in to our price range. And I still remember the day in 2006, we cut the ribbon out there, and we came in here. The chairs hadn't come in yet, and so we had folding chairs in here. And does everybody remember the folding chairs in here? It was all full of folding chairs. We came in here for our very first service, and we were overwhelmed with what God had done. We were overwhelmed with what God had done. A banker told me no one will ever loan you as much money as you want to borrow. 2 years later, 3 banks competed for our business. It wasn't one bank that was willing, it was 3, because God is a God of providence. Can you hear me? In 1996, I met with the leaders of our church. We had a planning day, and I laid out a strategy for our church to average 1,000 people on a Sunday in the next 10 years. In 2007, we averaged 1,000 people per Sunday because God is faithful. Many of you remember COVID. Do you know, providentially, God used COVID to help us create the online ministry we have now. Would you be surprised to know that between 700 and 1,000 people watch our service online every single Sunday? And that's all possible because through COVID, God made us focus on that ministry. This year, we're turning it into a 7-day-a-week ministry. In the very same way this building is open 7 days a week, we will provide online church things 7 days a week to serve those 700 to 1,000 people. It doesn't happen the way you think it will happen, but God is at work. We said we wanted to be a regional church, and so we started a campus in Elyria. This Christmas, they were 50 people short of 1,000. If I'd have known that, I'd ask 50 of you to go there. The West Campus is just thriving. We own 22 acres on Chestnut Ridge. We have a design from David Krebs to build an absolutely gorgeous building right there. And we're raising money for the down payment right now. We wanted to be a regional church. and we bought the church in Old Brooklyn, and we remodeled it and put a new roof on it and made it very, very nice. And they're averaging about 150 people a week now. God doesn't do it the way we think he'll do it, but he always does it. We're not just a regional church, we're an international church. Because of your generosity, we finance the orphanage in Uganda. And every one of those kids have the same Bible the same study Bible that we give our own kids. It took an act of God to get them shipped over there, but in spite of all the obstacles. You can see pictures of these kids. They hold their little Bibles like it's the most valuable thing in the world. They pride themselves in reading their Bibles to other kids in the neighborhood. Because of your generosity, we are an internationally influential church. We have the idea of being a century church. That means if we do this right, what we do now will affect this church in 100 years. You see? 41 years ago, 100 years seemed like a long time. Now there's only 60 of it left. The Century Church is an idea about mentoring and developing the next generation. The elders would tell you that if God called me to heaven tomorrow, the people who are in place, we won't miss a beat. The people are already in place. They're already functioning at a high level. Our second generation leaders could take over tomorrow. Not going yet, but our second generation leaders are already, guess what? We're already working on our third generation leaders. We took 8 kids to Atlanta so they could see people their very own age inspired to be part of what God is doing in their generation. We're working on a third generation group. Our fourth generation are in our children's program right now. Maybe we haven't identified them. Maybe we can't recognize them, but God knows their hearts. And through us, he's already at work in them, developing something, growing them, making them unique people who are capable of being part of making his kingdom work and representing the providence of God in their generation. When I look at the providence of God, looking forward, it doesn't work the way you think it should. But when you look back, the providence of God is crystal clear. We are the church we are, and we will be the church we are becoming because God is the one who is guiding us. He's governing us. He's ruling over us. He's directing our way. We are the church we are because in your hearts, God is at work, both to will and to work according to his own good pleasure. For you who don't know, Pharaoh had a dream. And it upset him real, real bad. And the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I had a dream and it's haunting me." And the cupbearer said, "Oh, my mistake has come to me. Remember when you were unhappy with me and put me in jail? I met a young Hebrew, and I had a dream. And the baker had a dream. The young Hebrew said, my dream meant that in 3 days you would restore me to my job. And that's what happened. And the baker's dream meant in 3 days you would execute him. And that's exactly what happened. And Pharaoh said, get that kid in here. They got him out of jail. They washed him up. They shaved him. They put a nice robe on him. They brought him to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, I've had a dream and it's haunting me, and I don't know what to do with it. And Joseph said, God gives the interpretation of a dream. Tell me your dream. He said, well, I was standing down by the Nile River, and 7 of the most healthy, good-looking cows you've ever seen were feeding there by the river. And then all of a sudden in my dream, 7 ugly, runty, scrawny, bones sticking out everywhere, cows came up out of the Nile. And all of a sudden, the ugly, runty, flea-bitten cows ate the good cows. But didn't change them at all. They were still as shriveled and skinny as they were to begin with. And Pharaoh said, I startled awake. And I fell back asleep and I dreamed again. And in the second dream, there was a stalk of corn and it had 7 absolutely beautiful ears of corn on it. The best looking corn you can buy. And then another stalk grew up and it was blighted. And it was rotting and it was all yellow and ugly and nasty. And the 7 ugly, nasty ears of corn ate the 7 good ears of corn, but it didn't change them at all. And Joseph said, I know what the meaning of this dream. There are going to be 7 years of great plenty. The harvest will be the best you've ever had. But at the end of those 7 years, there's going to be 7 years of famine, hard famine. And everything that you save in the 7 good years, you will consume in the 7 bad years. And Pharaoh said, I can't think of anybody else who would do a better job of handling this problem than you. And he made Joseph the premier of Egypt. And when when the famine hit and his brothers needed food, they had to come to Egypt. And guess who they met when they got to Egypt? They didn't recognize him, but he recognized them. You see, Joseph was the one who distributed food. And just as divine providence had promised him, they bowed down to him. And they asked to buy food. And everything that God had said to Joseph when he was a boy came true. Church, divine providence doesn't look the way we think it should look. But I want to ask you to trust without hesitation the wisdom and the power of divine providence. The same God who has blessed us in our work of attracting people to the excellence of God, of Christ, he's going to continue to do that. The same God who's prospered us in inviting people into the joy of ministry, he's going to continue to do that. Some of you are going to end up serving God in ways you never imagined. The same God who asks us to go on the adventure of faith and do things that are too hard and things other people said we could never do, that same God is going to continue to lead us on the adventure of faith. And the same God who has taught us to be a culture of generosity and fund good in the world, he's going to continue to do that. And we are, by the providence of God, we're going to fund good all over the world. It's a question of, do you trust the wisdom and the power of divine providence? Our dear Heavenly Father, you have been good. When the band sings, all my life you have been faithful, my heart says that's true. When I look at how you have providentially guided us, when I look at the problems that you providentially solved, when I look at the people that you sent at the exact time we needed them, when I look at the amount of money people have so generously given to such important causes, everywhere I look in our history, I see God at work providentially for a higher and more noble purpose. And I pray that as we remember what you have done, we would have more faith, more courage, more boldness to continue serving with you as you providentially create your church on earth. In Christ's name, amen.
If it's bandaging the broken or washing filthy feet, here I am, Lord, send me. If it's loving one another, even when we don't agree, here I am, Lord, send me. If I'm poor or if I'm wealthy, I'll serve you just the same. Here I am, Lord, send me. On the mountain or the valley, Lord, I would choose to praise. Here I am, Lord, send me. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes. 'Cause I love you. 'Cause I love you. 'Cause if the truth cuts like an arrow, I will say it anyway. 'Cause here I am, Lord, send me. If it means that they'll reject me, Lord, I will still obey. 'Cause here I am, Lord, send me. And if I'm known by how I love, then my life reflects how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes. 'Cause I love you. 'Cause I love you. When I'm standing in your glory, I'll be glad I chose to say, here I am, Lord, send me. Well done, good and faithful, I live to hear you say, here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, send me. Oh, here I am, Lord, send me. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. 'Cause I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes. 'Cause I love you. I love you. If I'm known by how I love, let my life reflect how much I love you. I love you. And before you even ask, oh, my answer will be yes. 'Cause I love you. I love you. You can have it all. You're faithful, you're faithful. Here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, send me.
What a sermon. So please bear with me. I was not planning on closing out the service today, so I'm a little nervous. But I felt a prompting from God, and so I said, send me. So as Doc was talking and telling the story of our history, I was thinking about my life. And I was like, I was there. I remember that story. I remember all of them. I've heard them dozens of times. And I was thinking about how my life has been impacted by the people that said yes all those years ago. And I think about the next 40 years, and right now we're in our history where we're growing and what God is doing in our church. And the cool thing is you guys get to be a part of that. You get to be in 40 years when they talk about when Christ Church was growing more than ever, and you get to say, I was there. I was a part of it. And I don't want you guys to miss it, although the one thing that I did not know was that it was my mother who was the one who was roller skating. Not shocked at all, but I found that all out when you did. But if you guys want to be a part of the next 40 years of what we're doing, the next 10 years, just come see me at the tent, because God is doing something amazing in this church, and I don't want any of us to miss it. So I pray that God would bless you this week, and you come back next week. Have a great week. God bless you.